world that moves fast and demands louder, there are men who think deeper, feel more, create from the quiet places within. This is Still Waters. Conversations for and about creative and sensitive men who refuse to skim the surface. Here we dive below the noise, into the currents of meaning, purpose, and authentic masculine depth. With your hosts, Bill Allen and Marcus O'Day. Still Waters. Run deeper.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the introductory episode of Stillwater's podcast. Hi, my name's Bill Allen. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm with my partner here, Marcus. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Bill. Thank you. And yes, my name is Marcus O'Day. I am an author. I am a highly sensitive man and former radio and TV personality. We'll try not to let that interfere with the podcast angle of it, but happy to be here. I'm excited about this project and Stillwater's being our way of having a conversation for and about sensitive and creative men. It's great to be here and to be embarking on this journey with you.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, on that same note, I am also an author. I've written a couple of books on highly sensitive men, particularly from my experiences and the things that I've learned in life. I have a website called The Sensitive Man, where I have blogs, newsletter, links, and information. We'll have some information about that on this podcast there on the website as well. We're really looking forward to this. There is a tremendous need, we both believe, for a podcast specifically, but not exclusively, for highly sensitive men. And Marcus and I both work in and around creative areas as writers, etc. We like to, in creative ways. Highly sensitive people tend to be very creative individuals anyway. So we think it's fair to say that it's a good topic to discuss in and around highly sensitive men. So, Marcus, let me get your interpretation of why you think Still Waters is going to be important as a podcast for highly sensitive men.
Sure. There is a marked difference between the way men process their emotions and feelings and everything, and others process emotions and feelings. And that's not a divisive statement or misogynistic, that's just basic biology. We process things in our own ways, and we come to those processes with a whole different biology. Yes, we're human, but we're not women, and so women have their own set of qualities that makes them extremely sensitive and emotional and whatnot, whereas men, we were always taught and trained not to show our emotions, not to have emotions. And like you, I grew up with big boys don't cry. Okay, that's a suppressive move on emotions. Man up. Got a lot of that as a kid because I was sensitive then too. And so I learned through upbringing that I wasn't allowed to have feelings and emotions. Finding your group, the men's group, was a revelation. And the conversations that we have there, I recognized immediately would make an excellent podcast because we can bring in the entire world this way. There, we're a little bit insulated, but not in a bad way. It allows us to have these conversations without fear of being outed as overly sensitive or too sensitive, which we all have heard. And I think this platform is probably the best way to get this out into the world and to allow us to redefine masculinity in the 21st century, because we're still dealing with toxic masculinity and all of these things where men are being called out for not being sensitive enough. And so if sensitive men can help guide the rest of the population to seeing emotions and feelings and whatnot to be something valuable and to be honored and cherished, I think we'll have accomplished something great.
Absolutely. So we both are entirely in agreement here on the idea that this is something that's necessary. It's a forum for highly sensitive men to come to, at least in the sense of being able to get information. And we hope to provide, this is our goal, is to provide evidence-based, as much as possible, information about high sensitivity and try to keep things factual, thoughtful, and cautious about pronouncements we have about masculinity or creativity or even sensitivity. So we'll have guests on that are leaders in their field, that are people who can talk to those very topics that Marcus was mentioning, and to give you good, reliable information about the trait. Now, we're going to have some fun too, because we're going to go off every once in a while on different tangents. So don't think that we're locked in or imprisoned or in a straitjacket about what we can talk about. And we do welcome individuals suggesting topics that we will consider as long as they follow along with some of our core or core triangle, if you will, of topics that we want to focus on. And those three things are: we do want to talk about sensitivity and how it relates to men. Men who are highly sensitive are dealing not only with their own personal feelings and self identity, but they're also dealing with cultural identity that has been foisted on them from a culture that has a defined idea of what masculinity looks like. A kind of a one size fits all masculinity that frankly just doesn't work mostly for highly sensitive men. So we're going to talk about that, get you more comfortable with the idea that you can be highly sensitive, still be a man, still be masculine, but in your own unique way. So we will be talking about sensitivity. The other thing that we'll be focusing on as well is creativity. Highly sensitive people tend to be very creative people. You'll see that a lot of people that are in writers, authors, directors, actors, painters,
Art
people that are in that space, the creative space. And it doesn't have to be just art, it could be problem solving and physics, for all I know. The idea is that highly sensitive people, because of our deep processing, and we're using that as an anchor to name this podcast because we believe it's that depth that we provide that is something that adds value. And it allows us to connect dots in different ways, in unique ways. And of course, as you well know, when you do that, you're usually creating something new and different. And that's an area we want to explore a lot because we do have a lot of men and women as well in the highly sensitive community that are very interested in creativity. And finally, the last thing on this pillar, of course, like I said, we will at times deviate from these topics, but for the most part, this is where we're going to be. And that's on this idea of masculinity. What is masculinity in today's world? There's a lot of people that are out there providing a definition for masculinity that we don't necessarily agree with. And so we want to explore that with leading thought leaders on what masculinity can be, what it is today, maybe some historical context about why masculinity has morphed and changed so many times over the years. So those are going to be three of our main topics in talking. So we hope that as you're listening, if something pops in your head about, I'd like to explore this, then you can certainly send us a communication of some kind and let us know. And we'll certainly look into trying to provide you either a guest or Marcus and I can probably take it on sometime, some of these topics, and just have a general discussion about it.
I'd like to add here, Bill, if
Sure.
that's okay. So you've mentioned masculinity and the fact that we don't necessarily agree with the current definition of what that is. Not That's not to say that we are going to reinvent the wheel. What Bill, I think, was saying is that masculinity has evolved, but society hasn't necessarily evolved with it. And so, what we're trying to do is bring these kind of into alignment for the rest of the world to be comfortable with in their sensitivity or whatever it is. And as far as sensitive people go, there's as many different types of sensitivities as there are probably humans on the planet. I myself, I am ADHD and sensitive and creative. And my creativity for me is the identity that I go by in my daily life. Sensitivity is secondary to that. So people come to this sensitivity and creativity thing with their own self identity definitions. So I just wanted to clarify that with our audience.
Absolutely. What I will say too is for just a second, maybe, Marcus, we can talk about what this podcast is not supposed to be. I think one of the things right off the bat is, again, we want to give you factual, good, reliable information about those three areas that we talked about. But it's not group therapy. It's not the therapy you can get on and expect therapeutic benefits from just listening to the podcast. So we're not trying to go that direction. It's not a bunch of self-help hype and stuff like that. And we're not, as Marcus just alluded, we're not going after men or masculinity per se. What we're trying to do is help add some clarity and perhaps help broaden the definition of what masculinity can be for a very broad, wide-ranging, and diverse population of men that this planet has. So we want to be able to elaborate, talk about those kind of things. We may even touch on some spiritual topics every once in a while because Marcus and I are both keenly into that area as well. And highly sensitive people, as a rule, not necessarily by definition or some kind of law, but highly sensitive people tend to explore spiritual areas because of the meaning and purpose that spirituality often brings to us. So we'll be touching on some of those topics as well. So you can look forward to that as well. Anything else, Marcus, you want to add or before we wind up here? We're really looking forward to doing this. I'm real excited about doing a podcast again for highly sensitive men and hoping that everybody that's listening uh, likes and shares our podcast and shares it with people, especially other highly sensitive men, or with people who love, care, and have highly sensitive men in their lives.
So, yes, I think a good suggestion for anybody who is interested is one, you can pick up Bill's books on pretty much any website that sells the books, and we'll have those on our website. And also, if you have questions about what we're talking about when we're saying highly sensitive, you can always go to the source, which is Dr. Elaine Aron, who wrote the book called The Highly Sensitive Person. And it's a valuable tool. It's how Bill and I got here in our lives, is starting out with that book and really figuring out how we identify with that. Dr. Aaron's research has been invaluable, and it has also evolved over time. One of our guests is going to be Dr. Tracy Cooper, who has a focus on high sensation seeking, sensitive people. And so there's just, like I said earlier, many different types of sensitivity. I can't wait to dive in. Definitely get some of the reading material or look into it for yourself. And we look forward to having this conversation with you.
Yeah, just a little follow up to what you said, Marcus, in reference to Dr. Aaron. If you are new to sensitivity, if you believe that you're sensitive but you're not sure, Dr. Aaron has a self test on her website, hsperson.com, where you can take a test and find out if you breach the threshold and considered to be highly sensitive. So there's a good way to find that out so that for your own edification, that you are in the category that both Marcus and I are, and many billions of people, several billion people on the planet that have this trait. Anyway, I guess that's going to wrap us up here, Marcus. Looking forward to our first interview coming up soon. And hopefully you'll stay tuned and get a lot of great information from us. So we'll see you in later episodes.
See you soon.
that moves fast and demands louder. There are men who think deeper, feel more, create from the quiet places within. This is Still Waters. Conversations for and about creative and sensitive men who refuse to skim the surface. Here we dive below the noise, into the currents of meaning, purpose, and authentic masculine depth. With your hosts, Bill Allen and Marcus O'Day. Still Waters. Run deeper.